is another GGP Connect webinar, a long series organized by GGP. Today we're gonna have the presentation from the Czechia team. So the title is Czechia Wave 2 for the second round of GGS. The presenter are Martin Kreidl. So Martin is a social demographer studying primarily family transitions. He has been the GP country coordinator for Czechia since 2014. Also, as an extra presenter for today, we have also Daniel Horn, and he's a soil meteorologist working for the Czechia team. I would like to give you the stage to you, Martin, and I invite all the people in the room. If they have questions, they can also write in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to have time to go through the questions, or ask even at the end of the presentation in person. So we have a very informal, open way of doing here. So Martin, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Perfect, Yuri. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining the seminar. The presentation is going to be split in two halves, roughly. I will start by presenting a very general overview of how Wave 2 unfolded in Czechia. I will tell you about the fieldwork procedures and the results. And then Daniel is going to tackle in more detail one particular issue that occurred in Czechia and in other countries, as we have learned already. And that is the issue of respondent mismatches between Wave 1 and Wave 2. So that is going to be his contribution in the second part of the meeting today. So before I start telling you about GGS-II, I need to remind you of a few facts about Wave 1, because it has got implications for what we were able or pushed to do in Wave 2. Wave 1 occurred between November 2020 and July 2022. So it was a very long data collection period. It was impacted by COVID and other things. So certainly, we didn't want to repeat that extended field work. 18 months was by far too much. So we needed to think about how to compress interviews into a shorter period. We wanted to keep that 36 month period between waves for all respondents, but we also needed to shift some people around to make it more feasible. An important aspect of Wave 1 recruitment was that we combined different recruitment methods. So we also had different contact information for each respondent, and we needed to take that into account when planning Wave 2 contacting strategies. In Wave 1, we were able to interview 5,594 respondents, and we combined CAPI and CAVI, but CAVI was the predominant interviewing method. Of those 5,500 respondents, only 4,907 agreed to be recontacted. So it was 88% of the full sample. Throughout my talk, I will at different points I will refer to the full Wave 1 sample, or to what I call the panel sample, which is the subset of people who agreed to be part of a panel. Hence, they agreed to be recontacted. Now, when we look at what pieces of information we had about email address and phone number, this is listed here. We had email for most of our respondents. We had residential addresses for almost everyone, but we also had 60% of respondents with a known phone number, so we could use short messages or calls as reminders. About Wave 2 questionnaire, of course, we started with the shared harmonized questionnaire, but we also added country-specific items Some of them were repeated from wave 1. Those were especially the questions about potential impact of parenthood. There was a battery of 8 items. Then the conditions for hypothetical future parenthood. That again was a battery, this time of 9 items. Experience of infertility, then a few other questions, plus a module on first reproductive experience that now was tested in Czechia and now is going to be implemented across other countries as well. So it is at least 30 additional variables for each respondent, a little bit more for people who didn't have that many filters in the last module. Keep that in mind when we show you completion times and things of that kind. So this was the questionnaire. Now the scheduling thing. As I said, wave 1 took place over a period of 18 months, and we needed to compress that. We decided to split wave 1 respondents into 6 groups or batches based on the date of wave 1 interview. And then the people who completed wave 1 questionnaire between November 2020 and November 2021 were assigned to the first group, and then everyone who was interviewed later was assigned to group 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So for the first group, the time that potentially was between wave 1 and wave 2 was somewhere between 38 and 50 months. For the later groups, it was 37 or 38 months. So this is how we dealt with the compression issue. And of course, if someone is interested in fertility realization between waves, this needs to be taken into account, because it is not enough to just record that someone had a baby between waves, but the fertility intentions were asked with the time frame, prospective time frame of 36 months. So the date of birth of the child needs to be taken into account as well. So this is the schedule. Now, how we proceeded with contacting respondents. We started on day 0. There was an email sent to everyone. And then after a few days, another email. And when we had a phone number, also a short message. And then starting with the third reminder, we also used phone operators to call people. We sent an email, a short message, and also phoned people to tell them, well, we sent you an email, we are really interested in you. You're looking into at that email and then log into the questionnaire. So this is the full procedure. There were up to 8 reminders spread over a period of up to 60 days. This is how it unfolded over time. That's in the graph. That's on the y-axis. There is a cumulative response rate. To explain the quick uptake between days 0 and 7, I need to point out that in addition to the standard conditional incentive, which was approximately 20 euros for everyone who completed the questionnaire, we offered respondents also a special bonus for quick engagement. It was 4 euros, so not a huge amount, but nevertheless, apparently, it motivated many people to engage with the questionnaire quite quickly. The overall response rate is 66% when we compare sample size in wave 2 to the full wave 1 sample. If we limit the computation only to people who agreed to be recontacted, then the cooperation rate is 74%. It is higher actually than what I expected. Those of you who have worked with GGS-I data from Czechia may recall that in the first GGS cycle, attrition rate was much, much higher. So I was quite pleased to see this relatively high degree of cooperation. Also, in this graph, note that participation was higher among females than among males, further contributing to the known gender bias in our surveys. Here is response rate by education. And again, the bias is still there. Among people with lower secondary education or less, response rate was only 53%. Among people with college education was 71%. And again, you have a graph here, so you see that it really persisted throughout the data collection period. So with additional reminders, we were not able to reduce the amount of education bias in the data. Now, how many reminders did we need to get people to respond? Well, almost half of people responded before the first reminder was sent. So that was pretty efficient. On average, we needed 2 reminders for people to fill out the questionnaire. The median time from the first contact to completion was 6 days. And it was pretty stable across those 6 groups that you see in the graph. There is some variation, but it is not that significant, I would say. Completion times, the median time was 35 minutes. There was a 1/4 of the sample who needed more than almost 1 hour or more. People were able to finish the questionnaire within the time frame that we indicated in the invitation letter. In this table on the right, you see the frequency distribution of times to completion. Know that we have about 30 respondents who apparently went through the questionnaire very quickly. They needed less than 15 minutes to finish. But we also have a bunch of respondents who took several days to complete from the first engagement to the final submission of the responses. But most people did it very quickly. When we look at the device that people used and switches between devices, PC was still the most common device. This is quite unlike some other countries. When you look at the graph on the right, you see that computer is a little bit more common among males than among females, more common among older respondents. You know, in the 60+ age group, 2/3 of respondents filled out the questionnaire on a PC. And PCs are also somewhat more common among the better educated respondents. Device switching was not a very frequent phenomenon. We recorded about 7% of respondents who switched the device between the beginning and subsequent questions. When switching occurs, it's typically from the smartphone to a PC. Almost 10% of people who started the questionnaire, who opened the questionnaire on a smartphone, didn't complete it on a smartphone, but on a PC. So, and the other way around, it almost didn't exist. So there is still a clear preference. No matter what we do to optimize the questionnaire for smartphone screens, people still apparently find it more convenient to open it on a larger screen if they have a larger computer, a tablet computer at home. Number of sessions. More than 1/2 of respondents completed the questionnaire in one session. So they started, went through all questions, submitted the responses. This is a significant change from Wave 1. In Wave 1, it was 90% of people. But I believe those 90% was highly dependent on the context. It was COVID. People were stuck at home. Now the context is obviously different. when we look at the distribution of the number of sessions across different socio-demographic groups, we see that one session is more common among older respondents and better educated respondents. And it's also more common among people who fill out the questionnaire on PC. So that's sessions, and now over to Dan Horn to speak about irregular respondents. Then I will be switching the slides for you, I think.
Sorry about that. That's fine. Hello, everyone. So digging further into the results from Wave 2 for Czech Republic, what we're looking at in this section is what's been titled irregular respondents, but what we're really looking at is respondent switching, where it's happening, the prevalence, and what we can learn from that. Martin, could you go? So if you go to the next one. So by respondent switching, what we're addressing here is when, obviously, for those who aren't familiar, when the respondent in the follow-up survey is not the same respondent as it was in the prior so Wave 1 survey. These are typically identified across different studies and including the GG and GGS using date of birth, so month and year, plus a gender variable. And then you have other studies, for instance, the ANES goes further by using names, age, date of birth, and also gender. There are some other studies that use, for instance, father's education. The main idea is to use invariant items to identify our respondents. The implications of this, of getting the wrong respondent, and a follow-up survey is that it jeopardizes the integrity of the longitudinal comparisons. Obviously, we're interested in change over time. So we're very interested to find out who is switching and if they're switching, or if they've just typed in the wrong key, for instance, 87 instead of 78. So in most studies, the outcomes of this are flagged and released data sets, as the GGS does. Some studies remove them altogether, so they don't appear in the final data, and also some weight those cases as 0, so they do not show up in the longitudinal analysis, or a combination thereof. One of the things that is important to remember, especially considering the idea of invariant items, is the remaining gender aware, because we are not using a sex identified at birth variable, we are using a self-identified gender variable. Could you go ahead, Martin? So if we look at the ANES, just as sort of a reference point, we see that what's happening in GGS is nothing new, and it's not isolated to the GGS itself. So the ANES did a validation study in 2020. They looked at what was actually occurring with these respondent switchings. They have a 4-category severity that they mark as no special concern, and as for you can see in the panel there. They then go on to find out whether or not the respondent was the intended respondent. So it could be, for instance, that the person answering it might not be the eligible person, but they've responded in both surveys. So that would be the respondent assessment further below. The interesting aspect for this as an infrastructure is what is done with those validated switchers. So in the 4th bottom right panel there is the actions that the ANES took to in response to validating which respondents were actually respondents and which were not, which were switching. Perhaps we need to update information for gender or for age. There could be a misresponse in the Wave 1 and the prior data set as well. Martin, if you could go forward. So for the GGS, we use a flagging process. Also, we use we flag potential mismatches by the year or month of birth. So if it differs, then it gets a flag of 1. We also match the same thing on gender, which is less complicated. It's either the male or female matches. The implications of this, however, are that if you don't have a value for wave 1 and you do put in a value for wave 2, it's counted as not a mismatch, or vice versa, which in the adapted flag that we use for the analysis here, we redo this by intentionally flagging 0, where we don't believe we can compute the match. So if someone has missed that month of birth in wave 1 and they've reported it in wave 2, we do not consider that a match. We flag that as an uncomparable. So flag by year 1 would be where we require the values observed in both ways to be the same, and 2 where they're not. Martin, you could go ahead. I was cognizant of time here. So across countries, we noticed that in the Czech Republic, we were interested to find out whether or not this is something bespoke to us, or whether or not this is occurring over the entire studies. And as we see, it's not isolated to Czech Republic. We have this across countries. So for the pairings that we could identify here, Estonia, Moldova, and Norway, we inspect which one of the new flags discriminate for potential mismatches, potential switching. Go ahead by 1. And we take those flags, so those persons that have been flagged missing, that have not continuous, we take them through a matching process where we first use the month year. So let me walk you through a bit further here because it's quite complicated. First, what we do is we harmonize all of the household members in wave 1. So if they're a partner, they get a P. If they're the current partner, they get a 0, 0. And we build a code for them for each one of their date of birth variables. So P00 underscore Y, of course, the current partner's year. P's underscore 01 underscore Y would be the previous partner. We do this also for the respondent. So both waves are being coded the same way. So we have harmonized variables. We compare the follow-up wave to all members of the prior wave. So what we're doing is investigating which one of the date of birth invariant variables is matching any of the variables in the previous wave. Because what happens, and you can see this even in the public data, that we have a non-significant amount of, or zero amount of duplicate date of births, and also duplicate date of birth and gender combinations across waves. So we need to be very wary about saying that we've matched a respondent based on their date of birth and or even gender, because other household members have the same exact information. So we do this iterative process. We first map on the month-year slots. If they're matched uniquely, so that there are no duplicate matches, they are considered matched. If that fails, we then move on to the year variable. So if the year variable matches, we do the same thing. If it matches uniquely, and if they're both multiple matches, we then move on to gender as a suggestion to what those unresolved cases may be. This is important for the next slide. It's going to be a bit more complicated. Martin, if you will. So for those of you who don't know, this is an upset plot. It's very busy. And essentially what this tells you on the side of the chart is which slot, so P00MY, so the current respondent, or sorry, the current partner's month year matched, compared to how many different combinations we're matching. So across the top there, you have sets. And we see that there are a lot of households and matches that are matching multiple household members. So it's very difficult to discern which one of those should be a genuine match. And we on the smaller graphs, these are also for Norway, for Estonia, for Moldova, the comparison sets. We're looking at, do we have a pattern here? And the biggest smoking gun there is that the duplicate variables, if you will, the mismatches are coming from the partners, either the current partner or the previous partner, and in some cases even second previous partner, which, as we'll see further, matches what the data shows as well. Martin, if you will. So sorry for the small table here. So looking at those that we could identify as continuous, so using this matching process that we're certain that those cases had continuity against those who we can with a good degree of certainty say that they're likely switches, and then of course those who are unable to definitively say who they were. What we notice is that the switchers are coming towards the older age groups. So they're primarily starting around the 45 to 54 year age group. And this tracks with what we would think about more established couples who share emails and then complete the survey for their partner, knowingly or unknowingly. We don't know the mechanism behind it yet, but this is what follow-ups would do. Also, that they tend to be in the lower education levels, but household income doesn't seem to have a very distinct pattern there. If we could go to the next. This is even smaller, and my apologies. The part that sticks out here confirms what we would consider by established older couples, for instance, that they're living in detached houses. But this could also mean that we have an instance of geographic trends. So this could mean that, for instance, those who are living in rural areas are tending to switch more than those living in urban environments. Again, this is something we're exploring more in depth. And also with the family indicators that are, supporting this later life trend is that, we see that those people are more likely to have children and grandchildren, but also that their biological parents are no longer with them, which would be consistent with older members switching. Martin, if you will. Going to more the operative side, we don't see, well, let me put this in a different way. What we see here is that peculiarly, as we did record recruitment in the prior wave, we have almost a flip from those whose field workers were sent out, had a higher rate for switching than those who were recruited during RDD, compared to those who made it through the wave, certainly. For the ones we couldn't discern, we don't see much of a pattern. It's 50-50. This could be two things, right? This could be the fact that the RDD was brought in during a time of COVID, when everyone had to switch to a new recruitment method. It could also mean that there's some mechanism within the two modes of recruitment inherently, and that is something worth exploring more. I don't know of any other GGS studies currently that have recorded mode of recruitment, but that's certainly something we could explore further. Further down the interview month, this is where Martin was discussing earlier that there was an intervention brought in after the first group, so after January and February. And the rates of switching, which unfortunately you don't really get to see in this table, declined slightly during the immediate period following that. So we could say, hooray, our intervention worked. However, it did go back up, and I'll show you a graph in a little bit. It returned back to its group 1 levels. So we have an issue whether or not this was seasonality or whether or not the intervention actually succeeded in preventing people from switching. It could also mean that people were being taught to the test, that they became aware that we were tracking that, and they changed their behavior. Whatever the mechanism is, it's clear that the intervention had some effect. Now, to what degree, we don't know. Next slide. So going back to the concern I mentioned previously about being gender aware in our study and our matching specifically, we look into whether or not using gender outperforms just using the date of birth or just using the year, so a very blunt instrument. And there's no large enough effect here. There's not a large enough effect, should I say, that in my opinion would drive us towards sticking with using gender as a de facto when we might be penalizing those persons who have switched gender or who are not reporting their gender. And the discrimination does a fairly good job if we are to use the gender as a backup variable and not as a primary variable for detection, identification, flagging. Next one. I'm just conscious of time here. So after using matching with gender, we resolved quite a lot of cases. So of the 207 respondents who had month-year mismatches, we drew back 161 unique candidates after doing the whole matching process for the priors. And for the 20 multiple date of birth candidates where we could not, 11 of those, so nearly 50%, were narrowed by using the gender variable. If we could go forward a bit. This is the trend towards the intervention is what we're looking at here. So you see directly after January and February, there's a dip around March and April of the switchers. So this light blue color, the mismatches, which then rise back up and towards July and towards the later groups. Now, the fieldwork monitoring is the aspect here that led us to do an operational response. This came from communication from the respondents about the eligibility of the incentives, which led there by interrogation of what was going on, and then this email reminder or email invitation stipulating that this was only for the prior respondent. Martin, do you want to go ahead by one? So this is a very busy graph, and I apologize for it. So this is a Sankey chart. I'm sure some of you are aware. The very small first circled area is areas where we found duplicates in the Czech data set. So these are duplicates from the prior file, the original file, and which duplicates they are matching to. The concerning part here is that those duplicates were then matched precisely by the month-year variable, which would be consistent with a hidden acceptance rate. So these are the original flags we used. So this is a comparison of the original flags compared to the later ones. The takeaway here is that if we stick with this, the flags that we've been using, we run the risk of having false positives. And to deal with that, we're going to have some proactive interventions in the future. Now, interestingly, all the ones who were found to be different matches all came from the non-duplicate cache there. Martin, if you will. So a few possible adaptations to address this issue. One, there's the static invitation and reminder content. And I say static, it's because there's no information here that's being given. It's just reminding the respondents that this is for the prior household or prior respondent in the household, the anchor respondent. One more, sorry, I think this is an animation. The second one is the one that was taken by the Czechia team when we were alerted to the fact that switching was possibly happened. Now here you see that we have the fills, so the collection year. So the question was fielded in this year by the gender of the person born in this year. This is a very proactive way to address this. However, it does lead us, and for those who are going into Wave 2 after this, it does lead the discussion to whether or not this has implications for the respondent behavior. Are we teaching to the test here? But it also has some ethical considerations of if there is indeed a shared email, and if gender is a sensitive topic for the respondent, should we be giving that information out to possible, somebody can see that who should not be. Say a partner doesn't realize that their partner has identified in this. It could also be nothing and harmless. But these are discussions that we need as an infrastructure to have and to be more proactive with our gender considerations. Now, dynamically, if you go ahead one, what we can do is also fieldwork monitoring and interventions. So taking a note from the ANS playbook, we can do interventions when we detect them and do callbacks or emails and just discuss whether or not these are actually, this is the correct data, if this is the correct person who is responding, this is standard. But there's also dependent interviewing, which is especially for online instruments, something that can be rather easily implemented, at least for the next cycle, probably not, or maybe by the wave 2. Could you go back just one?
Sorry.
So dependent interviewing, what we mean here is that we use the variables that we have from the previous wave to feed into what we have in the current instrument. So if somebody were to enter 1987 as their date of birth in wave 2, we could have a soft check and say, do you mean to type in 1987? Our previous records indicate, an alternative date, however you want to phrase that. The proactive response would be to give the information first, such as the static email, where we say the previous person answering was male from 1985. If you do that, there's a chance they might just agree with that and type in that information. The reactive dependent interviewing method is possibly more justifiable here, because what we want to know is how often do respondents punch in the wrong information. And we can use that information later for diagnostics, for instance, on the question. And that would be your soft and hard checks. So if they do type in the wrong information, we can check that to see whether or not they actually mean to do that, and so forth. The next issue is whether or not we really want to encourage or enforce this. So this is soft check versus hard check. Do we let it go forward, even though we consider the information not to be matching? Or do we stop the interview there and not let it go on? Another issue is whether or not we would do a parallel route for unintended respondents. So if we do route to the fact that, are you the correct respondent, would we then be willing to allow partners to then fill out a parallel survey so that we do get some information and not lose the interest of the household, right? So what we don't want to do is lose completely the household from the panel, or the case from the panel. And the last is using a sex assigned at birth. Martin, you can go ahead one. Sorry about that. So using a sex assigned at birth method plus a gender would help us to integrate a defined variable. So this is an event. Respondent knows what their original sex assigned at birth was, and it's generally acceptable and recommended across the literature for surveys that are being gender aware. And it also allows us to integrate this diagnostic rather seamlessly into the instrument. But this probably is something more substantive and needs to be discussed for the next cycle of GGS. Martin, if you want to go ahead. The silver linings, having been able to now walk through the boring parts, looking at our switchers and breaking them down by, that we're pretty certain that they're partners and we take their gender. The substantive interest here is that when we look at those who have switched by their different dyads, right? So we're looking at what the responses were to particular variables. These variables that we're looking at right here are the absolute difference and sign differences of household chore frequencies. So we're looking at the respondent from the prior wave, how they said that how often they do dishes, for instance, compared to what it was for the follow-up wave. And what we see is distinct differences between those we definitely can consider continuous respondents, and those we know for a fact are not, or with high certainty are different persons. I say this as for me, it's quite striking how divergent the responses are, which means I think a lot of times this is just happenstance that somebody else is taking the survey. They're not trying to manipulate the data. It's an honest mistake. It's an honest occurrence. But by keeping this data, we allow ourselves the ability to then model if we can use certain variables to detect hidden mismatches that are not being flagged because they are duplicates. Martin, do you want to go ahead? So those are the recommendations. This is my last slide. So approaching wave 2, it is good to be mindful of the duplicate households that do exist, because this will impede your matching process. But also to remain aware that the field work and situations and the quality control are useful for the entire GGP infrastructure to be able to do analysis, for instance, what we're now doing in Czech Republic. So for the next cycle, a discussion that could be had is whether or not to institute the sex assigned at birth, plus the gender, so not to lose the gender, to implement some responsive dependent interviewing, so some feed forwards, a bit more complexity in the instrument, whether or not to implement this in generic invitations and or reminders is something that needs to be discussed. So we don't want to give fills and give away private information, what implication this has for GDP, or sorry, data compliance. And lastly, just, we could probably do more with the CAWI and the CAPI checks and instruments that we have currently. And what is really needed is an infrastructure-wide assessment of what's going on and what we can make out of that. Those would be the recommendations we have. And I think that should be the final. This was to explain whether or not you didn't understand what an upset plot was. So this is the current World Cup. So if you are somebody who got all of the characteristics, you would be considered somewhat of an ultra fan. And if you're just melting in the sun over in North America, then, well, you're pretty few and far between. And I'll leave that with a colorful slide and go.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Martin, for the presentation. Now, I would like I invite everybody to switch on the camera so we can see each other. That would be a nice way to address the discussion now. So we already have a question in the chat, but if anyone else has another question that they want to voice, just raise your hand and then I will give the floor. Maybe Isabella, you want to say your questions first?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if these flags that you mentioned are if they're generated automatically within the NEDI tool, or if the survey agencies in the countries, or if the country teams have to generate or calculate them. That this flag that there is a difference in age and or sex.
It happens at NEDI, as far as I know. So I don't know if anyone from NEDI wants to explain the logic or the procedure, just briefly.
Who wants to take it from NEDI? Maybe Nursel, go ahead.
First, thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting. And I have a question. So is this study was carried out in collaboration with Olga and Christian from the UK?
No, it was not. We just had an email exchange with Olga on Monday and Tuesday. So we are just learning about each other's procedures.
Okay, because we have recently got some emails from them, because they are working also on the same topic, the same country. So I was wondering if it is the same thing. So for the flag variables, we were actually discussing the procedure of recording flag variables with ESMA recently. So this is the way it has been done until now. So they look at the sex. Actually, the question is gender, but it's also a discussion because the question actually asks sex, not gender. There's a confusion in that part first. And then the flag variables, what we do at NEDI, or like what previous people have done until now is, so as Dan explained, they compare the birth, month at birth or year at birth. And in some countries, in these 4 countries, we have registered data. So we compare, we link the data. And if there's a mismatch, we record them as 1. And if there's missing cases and if there's no mismatch, we record them as 2, which is problematic. We accept, and we were thinking about that, what to do with those cases, how to record them. And I think the recommendations from Dan is very useful for us to improve our data quality checks, and also soft checks during the questionnaire design, etc. So gender is that. So this is how flag variables are recorded. And then my question is, when we got this email from Olga and Christian, we noticed that actually in the past, the register data from Estonia, there was a mistake. So probably your analyses are also mistaken. We are now currently working on that, and we will release the data very soon, and we will inform you about that. So the data quality the data we get from country teams also sometimes prone to errors. Just consider that. So it's not just wave 1, wave 2, but in wave 1, in 4 countries, we have registered data. So we matched the wave 1 birth year and sex with the registered data. So I think this is the explanation from my side. If you have further questions about how this is done at Trinity, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Nursel.
May I just, sorry.
Go ahead, Isabella.
I mean, the flag, I understand that the flag in the first wave, if there is a discrepancy between the registers and the survey. But then the flag in the second wave means if there is a discrepancy between first and second wave, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and this is then also generated automatically within the system?
Exactly, during processing the data.
Thank you. Yes, and then thanks once again to Martin. I mean, this was very, very interesting and important, and especially for the countries who are just preparing for the second wave. So this is just the right point in time. Thank you.
Any other question from the audience? Anne, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much to the Czech team for that. I have a question first to Martin. Obviously, the response rate at wave 2 is very good. I'm wondering, could you say something about if you have done any panel maintenance strategy, or did you even do a wave 1.5, if I'm not mistaken? Or maybe you can elaborate again if it's a tip for the other countries. And then to Daniel, I may have missed it, but if I'm not mistaken, the month of birth is very often missing, and therefore it's a bit problematic to use it as a way to identify your participant, your respondent. So I'm wondering what you've then done in your sort of algorithm. Do you exclude these respondents, or what do you do? Thank you.
Okay, regarding panel maintenance, there was no survey between wave 1 and wave 2. We are organizing a 2.5 wave now, but there was nothing in between waves 1 and wave 2. We did what I would consider the standard things. We circulate a brief newsletter to respondents every 6 months. It is a very simple PDF that reminds them of the survey and highlights a few of the results and media appearances. And the other thing that we do is, the outreach through media, building the brand of the survey. And we do share this on social media, especially on Facebook, to communicate to people, to respondents, that the data is being used, that it is being circulated in the public domain, and that society gets something back from their aggregated responses. That's basically it. Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, actually, because this was when we went through the analysis to begin with, we actually, and this is sort of addresses the question about Estonia, we went ahead and generated our own flags and then compared them against the old flags and the new flags, so that we could tell who to do the matchings from. So it's all computed from the data, not from what NEDI had done. Now, to answer the question about the how we do the matching, or how the matching is done here anyhow, so it's iteratively. So if we find a month-year match and it's a unique match, we then consider that we take that out of the pool of matching, we move to the year. If we find a unique match, for instance, exactly what you're saying, a lot of the months are missing or not put in, we then look for the unique year among all the possible household members and all the possible contacts. If we do not find that, and also if we don't find them through the annotations, then we consider those unable to calculate. But there are actually quite few respondents who have neither, who are not able to match. That is the good news. There's a high continuity of finding these persons, even without using the gender variable or sex variable as used, which is comforting to know. I think we can always do better. And so, yeah, that's how the matching process works. It's a very iterative one. Once they're spotted, they're taken out, removed, and the next one proceeds down the step. I hope that helps.
Okay, so if we don't have any other question from the audience, I will again thank you, the presenters, and I will invite you for the next webinar. We're going to have the next GGP Connect webinar at the end of July, and Iceland will present their experience. And so I hope we're going to see you there also for the next GGP Connect webinar. I would like to now thank you again, the presenters, and wish you a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you to you. See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.